Are tithes required of believers, Christians, under the New Testament? You don't have to go very far on social media to see posts from people saying that you don't have to pay tithes because Jesus never told us to pay tithes, and you don't find tithes in the New Testament, you only find them in the Old Testament. Is that right? Is that what the Bible actually says? Well, let me answer that. Attempt to answer that in just a moment here. What is the origin? I'm going to ask you two questions that I want you to answer to yourself, because the answer to that is the answer to the tithe question of whether or not Christians have to pay tithes biblically. Number one, and I'll tell you, one of these two questions is a trick question. Okay, first question. Is tithes in the Old Testament? The answer to that is yes. Yes, tithes are found under the Old Testament. The second question is, or are tithes started in the New Testament? I'm sorry, are tithes started in the Old Testament? The answer to that is no. Tithes do not have their origin in the Old Testament. Now, let me ask you this. Testament. Most people think of Old Testament, New Testament as being the divisions of books in the Bible. They're typically categorized as Old Testament, New Testament, Genesis through Malachi, Old Testament, Matthew through Revelation, the New Testament. And that's not necessarily wrong. But the concept of testament, that word means will, covenant especially. Covenant would be a far better word to use. What is the Old Testament? Does it start in Genesis? No. If you look at Hebrews, especially Hebrews chapter 9, what you'll find is that the Old Covenant, what the Old Covenant actually is, the Old Testament, it's the law. That was the first, in fact, Hebrews 9:1 calls it the first covenant. So the first covenant, the first testament, what we call the Old Testament, started at Sinai. It lasted from Sinai to crucifixion. Then the New Covenant started. The New Covenant was prophesied by Jeremiah in Jeremiah 31. It was prophesied that what Jesus would do in Daniel 9. If you don't understand that reference, go back to my channel and watch the video on prophecy, especially the first one where I talk about what Jesus was prophesied to do when he would come and he would confirm the covenant with many, confirm the Jeremiah 31 covenant. Okay, so you have the first covenant, starts at Sinai, and then it ends at Calvary, at the cross of Jesus' crucifixion. Jesus fulfills it. He said, I came to fulfill the law. And then the second covenant, the new covenant that we are a part of, started and continues to this day. Were tithes a part of the old covenant? Yes. In the law of Moses, tithes were commanded. But what is the first instance of tithes? It's not under the law. Tithes is first found in Genesis, before the institution of the first covenant, when the father of the faithful, Abraham, paid tithes to a man named Melchizedek, who is called the King of Righteousness or the King of Peace. Read in Hebrews 7 and you'll find that Abraham paid tithes to, or talks about Melchizedek. And then Hebrews 9, you'll find that Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek. And Jesus is a fulfillment of the priesthood of Melchizedek. Now, I may have lost some of you there, but just hang with me for just a moment longer. So when you look at Scripture, not in these divisions of books, but when you look at Scripture, you understand it's one plan of God from beginning to end. And you have in the first part, you have Abraham. He meets with Melchizedek, pays tithes to Melchizedek. Then 430 years later, at the giving of the law on Sinai, you have the first covenant given. That's the law of Moses. That extends till Jesus was crucified. After Jesus' crucifixion and 50 days later, the giving of the Spirit at Pentecost, you have the second covenant, the new covenant that we are a part of. But tithe goes beyond. It precedes the first covenant. So the idea that tithes are not New Testament is simply false. I'll tell you, before I end this, one of the reasons why that it wasn't specifically laid out in the New Covenant, for the same reason that many things that were considered to be, say, immoral under the first covenant continue under the new. They didn't reiterate because it didn't change. And so Paul, especially Paul, Peter, James, and all the others, being Jews, they understood tithing is a part of what we do, and they brought it with them into the new covenant. So yes, tithes are a part of a new covenant believer. Paying tithes, in fact, Hebrews 7 talks about that here mortal men receive tithes. So paying tithes to your local church is absolutely a part of the new covenant that we are part of, and being a believer under the new covenant, being a Christian believer. Don't pay tithes to somebody online. Don't pay tithes to somebody that you watch stream on YouTube or Facebook or whoever. You pay tithes to your local assembly where you are a part of and where you are being fed. That is who you pay tithes to. So the answer to the question that I started out with is, do you have to pay tithes? Absolutely. Tithes is a part of the church. The Lord bless you.